Hello, everyone. How we doing? We are back. We're talking Roma's tactics. What should Roma, Giallorossi do? What should Mourinho choose going further? What did Thiago Pinto have to say in his press conference? Why did I drop lasagna all over my pants? And more. So that's what we're going to be getting into today. This is a recorded version. I know that people's time is precious. Not everyone has time to jump onto a 45 to 50-minute live stream. But I did, especially in this Sosta, in this break, I wanted to cover a couple different topics, and I think we should honestly get right to it. And yeah, it's true. I have stains all over my pants because I was cooking lasagna, and when I threw the turkey, made a turkey in the sauce lasagna, and when I threw it onto the oil, it splashed back onto my new shorts, and then as I was eating it, it fell into my lap. I don't know. It's not good news. It's not a good look either. I wouldn't suggest it, but before we go into the tactics, there's a couple things I wanted to get to, and one of those is the recent call-ups by the new Azzurri manager, Luciano Spalletti, who Roma fans know very well, and the rest of the league also at this point, having finally won his Scudetto, know just as well. And we could see a bunch of Roma players here, but let's just read off the names: Barella, Cristante, Fratesi, Locatelli, Pellegrini, Pessina, Tonali. I think that he's definitely going to go with Tonali as the starter here. Fratesi as well. Maybe Cristante as the holding midfielder there. Maybe Locatelli. I think you could make a case more so for Cristante. Or, could you leave? No, it's got to be Barella, doesn't it? Barella over Fratesi. That's going to be an interesting setup to see what Spalletti goes with. 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3. I'm not sure. Chiesa, Gnonto, Immobile, Politano, Raspadori, Retegui, Zaccagni, and Zaniolo. And speaking of Zaniolo, Aston Villa got crushed by Liverpool 3-0. And the match preceding that, they actually put up 3 goals. He didn't start. I don't think he's going to end up starting over Diaby. Looks to be a decent signing. Aston Villa have a really cool team. However, as we look, what did I gloss over? The defenders? Yeah, I did. Bastoni, Biraghi, Casale, Darmian, Di Lorenzo, Di Marco, Mancini, Romagnoli, Scalvini, and Spinazzola. So you've got Mancini, Spinazzola, Cristante, and Pellegrini representing I Lupi. In keepers, of course, Donnarumma, Meret, Provedel, and Vicario. Provedel definitely deserves to be up there. He was probably the first or second best keeper in the league last season. A couple other names here. Giovanni Di Lorenzo. I think if you're somebody who supports the Azzurri, you got to be really proud. He's been great. I think he's one of the reasons him coming. What was he? He came off the bench, or I'm trying to remember exactly what happened in Euro 2021, but he played a big part. Did he not? He did a good job there. And on top of that, Meret, I just look at Napoli's squad, and they're strong. They're strong all over. And I think about that last game with Lazio and Napoli losing, and also Rudy Garcia, right? Garcia, he's gonna have to really rise to the occasion now. I mean, coming off the Scudetto, they lost Kim, but they've got other players, man. I just think that he's got to show, because he is a good manager. I think he is. His time at Roma, I thought he was solid. But moving away from the Azzurri for a second, I also thought this was cool, something I wanted to share, what Sampdoria are doing. So check out my buddy Richard's post here. He says, you always see a great poster image, and this one involves a sea battle. So when these port cities play each other, and I noticed that Sampdoria they had this dark pirate-like theme, and I love it. Look at that. It's so, I guess I'm going to get personal. One of my favorite movies is Pirates of the Caribbean, and it really reminds me of that, but Italian style, which is super cool. You could see the Genoese flag up here, which is awesome. Good little Easter eggs. And in the back right, I wonder what they were going for. Oh, that's Venezia. I'm pretty sure. And they just did a great job on this. So Pisa right there in red, that's what that's supposed to be. Kind of looks like Redbeard's. Or is it Blackbeard? Redbeard, right? Pirates of the Caribbean. It's like the 5th or 6th one at that point. And then they released this other one, with one I was showing previous to that, and I just thought it was super cool. This guy looks like a Renaissance pirate or something. And then you've got, it was Venezia. So they were foreshadowing Venezia on the horizon as the ship. And here you've got the Lion of Venice there. So just excellent attention to detail. You look at that on the left, and you've got Sampdoria's colors, and then, who's coming in. just look all around. Really cool. I mean, even in the background, their illustrator did a knockout job of this, guys. But as we move on, we move past the Azzurri, we forget about Sampdoria. There is something I think that needs to get discussed, unfortunately. And it is, pulling it up now, it's this. This is the shots that should have been saved. Post shot XG expected percentage here. And at the very bottom, you see who's very under here, the worst. And it's Patricio, 41.7% goals allowed under his XG, or really over, whatever you want to say here. Consigli was the second worst, Patricio being the first worst in Serie A. Tatarusanu there, something you expect. Tarachano, Handanovic as well. But Rui Patricio, I mean, over 41% is staggering. And we also see here that Perin actually was somebody who delivered very much, stopped a lot of expected goals against him. Sepe, Falcone. Falcone is a keeper to watch, guys, as Portieri and these keepers kept being sold out of Italy for high sums or to the strongest 2 or 3. You got to keep an eye on these names here, whether it is Sepe or Falcone or Di Gregorio, who's on the younger side of those. Carnesecchi, I think, is the youngest. So Silvestri, Vicario, who's gone now. It's worth keeping an eye on. I think Sepe went to Milan, if I'm not incorrect, just off the top of my head. Now we're going to jump to tactics. And before I say that, the game against Milan, it was a disappointment. But when we put it more into context and you think of that team that Roma played had 4 world-class players just in the top 4, whether it was Pulisic or Giroud. They're really well-oiled. These are guys who've been around the block. They're champions. They've got a little bit more in them. So I think that as far as class goes, I think Milan's a step up. But that doesn't hide the fact that Roma came out flat. Roma didn't do enough. That I won't make excuses for. Roma were tactically manipulated. Roma made individual errors. So I asked, and yes, before I go into those tactics as well, I asked on Instagram, what would be the best formation for Roma? And what does Roma need? I think that's actually is more like, what does Roma need? And I've got a few. I didn't upload them to show you, but I've got them here in front of me as I'm recording. And this is same Instagram, Wayne in Rome. You can go ahead and check it out. I post a little bit type of different content, more questions and stuff with music, things that I'm interested in. I got over 25 comments here, actually. Carlo Kane says Roma need to get healthy. Naxilo says a proper keeper and somebody who can guard and lead the defense at its core. Ficatello08 says 4 at the back and a change in topics. Courtney Go says ownership that doesn't cast a team and coach like a blockbuster movie. Aditya Sagara says a suitable strategy. Silusimo says late Franco Sensi gave watches to the Ref Association. Time for Santa Friedkins. So a little bribery there. Tim Falco, sign a defender. Itifosi, wingers. Chicho, play better. Yeah, play better. I would say that's pretty high up, but I think wingers is a good shout too when it comes to the overall speed and danger that Roma have on the wings. Limited. El Shaarawy is the only true winger at this point. Angelo says a new strategy and Pellegrini benched. Omar Abu Gaber says I have no injuries for Roma to have no injuries. Yeah, easier said than done. With the whole squad available, Roma can be a strong team. P. Barone says hopefully just some time to fully assemble the squad. Charlie Smash says replace Rui Patricio and change the midfield when injuries are back. A lot of good input here, I would say. Dimas Pracoso says David De Gea, who, he's going to go to Saudi Arabia, isn't he? I don't know if that's going to be able to. I would love for Roma to have signed De Gea. Even I know he made a lot of mistakes last year, but I just think in a better headspace, different culture, the Sun actually instead of Manchester, I think he would do a lot better, and he would be an upgrade. Big Vito 87 also says healthy Cliff Esmial says healthy. What's up, Cliff? TNV Clothing, who you should check out on Instagram, TNV_clothing. As always, cool pics of shirts. Says, killing me here. BX Stallion says grinta and some actual tactical organization. CMC says a healthy squad with a second tactical formation, 1 to 2 passes and triangles, less over the top. I would like to see that too. And Rawan MDO1 says a goalkeeper. So there's commonalities we see here. We see strategy, we see a different goalkeeper, and we see attitude. And I think everyone is correct in these comments. So if you participated on IG, thanks a lot. And I think we had some fun with that. So let me take off this slide here about Rui. I know that's probably somewhat depressing. I should have taken that off before. And now we go to Rohit Rajiv on Twitter. I'm going to share this tab here. So this is a quite a long thread. And I'm going to start here, which is like halfway in. And if we read his bio, it says an entrepreneur with an eye for tactics and microscope. Maybe he's a scientist and writes for Sempre Milan and Get Italian Football News, which has a lot of followers. Wow. Okay. So he says Roma off the ball played a 5-3-2, off the ball using a mix of man and zonal marking. But what Jose did was he wanted his back line to stay back due to Leao and Pulisic putting them back. And you can see here he played them a little bit deeper. I would say this is actually almost a little higher than Roma typically play with their back line, baiting the press. So look at this here. Look at this comment that's made. Now, half of Roma's outfield team are engaged in pressing Milan's players, creating spaces between midfield and defense. Do you know why this is? This is because once Milan scored that first goal, like I've said before, Mourinho'S plan B is sometimes not strong. And that made this tactical error, I should say, deficiency, where once Roma were baited into the press because they had to get the ball back, that made a huge space between the defense and midfield. And it's actually noted here. So Rohit does a good job. And he says space between the lines. With Mourinho's reluctance to push his defense up and midfield being forced to press, this created a space between the mid and defense, which was exploited by Reinders and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And Ruben Loftus-Cheek was a big problem. And you have probably seen the clips going around how the Milan players were yelling at Pioli when he was ready to take him down. Okay, a little diamond here. Short passing distances, Rohit says. A change from last season was the distances between the players, playing it short. This meant that Milan could play quick, short passes to play out of the press. Here we can see Milan forming a passing diamond. And yeah, when you have like a, halfway press and you're not fully pressing as a team, and a team like Milan with smart players, they will manipulate that with these shapes. They'll do overloads. So here we see, maybe that's Pellegrini there, towards the bottom right of your screen at the right side of that diamond. What is he going to do? He's got this player here who's checking him, but it's a 4v2. You can't do anything against that. Third mad runs from Teo Hernandez. And this was really dangerous because once there was that gap, what Teo would do is he would pass to a teammate. His teammate would pass to another guy. But Teo, because he's so fast and has that endurance, made these runs off the ball that weren't being tracked, these piercing runs. It's so dangerous, man. Like, he's a great player getting forward. I take nothing away from him. I don't Rohit did here, so I'm going to pause that real quick. And he says he was disappointed with Calabria because once Spinazzola came in, he was taking advantage of him. And he ends it by saying, Milan were cruising until the Tamori red, and now blah, 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 whatever. Cruising until the Tamori red. And I have to agree with it. Would Spinazzola have been as dangerous if it was 11v11? I don't think so. I think, or would Lukaku even have? I can't say that with a straight face and be like, yeah, Roma would definitely have gotten back in it and gotten that goal. I'm not sure they would have. Not sure. I want to believe that they could have picked themselves up by their bootstraps and gotten tough about it and showed some intent. But without that man advantage, I didn't see anything from Roma throughout that period of time. It's something which also makes me contemplate, right? What does Roma need to do? And I ask myself this. I never want to assume that I know better than the coach or the staff or the players for that. But I do think that there is something to say for going to the back four. I think there's also this conflict of not having a true defensive midfielder, which was Matic. And now that brings us to the Thiago Pinto press conference. First question, starting a coach, we're not going to go through every single one. I'm not going to read this. This would take me 3 hours. He says, what do you think are the company's projects on Jose Mourinho? And he says, I don't want to break my word. I talk a lot. He says, I don't talk much, but I want to clarify what was going on with the market. And he doesn't really go into details about Jose here. So he kind of he doesn't dance around the question. He just doesn't answer it. One thing I like here is this next question. Will there come a time when Roma will start reinvesting in the youth sector again? This has been one of my criticisms, is that too many youth players have been sold out at this point. I understand why, but I don't like it. He says it's important to take on young players who have sporting and economic results in the future. If I'd paid $20 million for Ndika and OR, perhaps this question would not have been asked, as they are both under 25 with hundreds of games in major competitions. Goes on, and I think this is important. We, with the conditions we have, are trying to rebalance all three of these levels. It's not easy. It's not simple to guarantee a team that is better than last year, meet the demands of financial fair play, and at the same time have players with future prospects. With the arrival of Mourinho, the youth sector has always been an important part of the strategy because he has always bet on it from day one, bringing many players to the first team. He cites Zalewski and Bove and goes on. He says, Ndika and Anwar are examples of this too, in guys that will allow Roma to come at a low cost. Yes, they may increase the wage bill, but having bought them at zero cost, he says, it may seem that they are someone's waste, but that's not the case. He's asked about Marcos Leonardo. You're probably excited about this one. I'm actually glad that he answered straight up. He said, yeah, he's a goal. He's a goal of Roma. You know the world of football well. These players have value. When they have opportunity to buy them, we do it when we have it. Is there an obligation to fight for the Champions League? And he kind of goes in a different direction here. And he starts talking about Renato Sanchez and Dybala. I would have answered this, I think, Strip. I would have said no. Would have said you have to look at all the other teams, like in top 5, Milan, Juventus, who are without European football, Napoli, the champions, Inter, much stronger. And I would say, look at how much those teams invested versus Roma. How could Roma seriously expect to compete against these teams which have much less pressure, against these teams which sold the player for 80 million and brought in 5 more guys? But he does speak a little bit about Renato Sanchez, how he wanted to bring him in, and says he's going to assume responsibility if that doesn't work out as well. He kind of is asked here about the referees, if it's going to be the same ones. And he says, we expect everything to be the same. He says, we expect justice. He says, I'm having difficulty understanding the road that football is taking. So because there's sometimes calls that are made, sometimes VAR is not viewed, sometimes VAR is viewed, and the wrong call is still made. About Beltran, he's like, yeah, we weren't in for Beltran. He's like, Fiorentina took him, whatever. And he says, I think all Roma fans are happy to have Lukaku rather than Beltran. So, and I would agree with that. Instead of not a risk, but a younger guy who would have been just a prospect, I'm happy to get Lukaku and hopefully the Brazilian in January. Matic. On Matic, he says, you like to talk about my failures. I want to say great things about Nemanja. It's a situation that I don't regret and I didn't expect. The last 2 weeks for Matic in Rome, I didn't expect, he says. Then he speaks about, you guys always make it negative. He says, what about Paredes, who I just got? And then says, if Matic wants to explain, he can do it himself. And he always says that he was one of the players he liked most, and that he's free to make his own choices. And then about Fratesi and Scamacca, doesn't really answer it too. It just says he loves them, and we also took some money, that Roma made some money off those sales. I don't think that's what we wanted to hear. I think fans, including myself, wanted to hear an explanation as to why Fratesi was not purchased. Look at a mosquito in my house. And why Scamacca was not brought over the line when it seemed like everything was, and he even said he wanted to come back to Rome. Okay. I'm not going to go over this about Fratesi and this too much. I don't want to beat it out of us, but it gets a little, financial here in the weeds. But he notes that Roma did accumulate 7 to 18 million with Tahirovic, Missori, and Volpato. and that's more than 30 million euros that Roman made that don't count. He's speaking about the UEFA budget there. So, because he did make 34 to 35 million, which was a stipulation under financial fair play, and goes on to speak about how hard it was to negotiate to get Paredes over the line. Goalkeeper, he said, basically, Roma win as a team, Roma lose as a team. And, as we look at that statistics sheet from 5 minutes ago, it's concerning. But he says, Rui was somebody who used to be at the top for Serie A clean sheets. But I think that it wouldn't be proper for him to go on and say, yeah, we're looking for somebody else, because you don't want to do that to a player where confidence is essential for their position. But in our meantime, there is a big problem, and that percentage can't be hidden. And Roma do need an upgrade ASAP. Can we put it another way? I don't think so. Okay. Let's keep going a little bit more here. He says, I thought this one was funny. He says, the most difficult negotiation you faced. He said, I'm truly a lucky person because the first summer I couldn't leave the house when Dzeko went to Inter. The second summer, in addition to Wijnaldum and Matic, I brought Dybala when nobody wanted him. Now the same thing happened with Lukaku. They're all different negotiations, different people. The main goal is to feel the players are on our side, because with these players, it's not a matter of contract or money, but trying to make it clear that Roma is a club in which you can feel important. And we've said this before about how when you talk to these players and they're coming in for free or whatever, there's other suitors. So what's the difference between Roma and anybody else who offers them 5 million a year, 3 million, 2 million, whatever it is, right? It's that they feel important. Is that when they get there, that maybe it's not expected, but there's this big, show at the airport or in front of the Fendi building in Rome, right? And thousands of people come out. That's love. That makes you feel like people want you there, and that makes you give your all. Okay. He says people have too much time when speaking about Dybala. He says he's happy here. We'll do everything to keep him. Okay. The secret to getting Lukaku is always the same. Wait for the right moment. With Lukaku, it's 4 to 5 days. That's how long it took him to get him. With Dybala, 5 days. He says if you talk too much, you miss out on opportunities. The Georgian market, Kvaratskhelia comes up, right? And he says, yeah, actually, we do have to keep an eye on international competitions and leagues, because if he's from there, who else could be out there? So it's just showing, I guess, that Roma needs to keep an eye and have scouts everywhere, so to speak. And I think that's a big takeaway for me as somebody who watches football and supports a team that is under financial scrutiny, is how do you squeeze more out of the lemon? And how do you do that? You got to be smart. And you got to look at other leagues, whether it's Belgian, the Dutch league, and maybe even the second division of the Dutch league, let's say, right? You got to be everywhere. Belgian, Belarus, whatever that might be. Kvaratskhelia comes from Georgia. Like, that's not a team. That's not a country which we typically think of being hot with footballers. So I also learned that rule from Soccernomics. Yeah, Soccernomics. Decent book. Zapata, he says, nope. He says, we talked to him. It was a negotiation. Didn't go through. And to end this about the season, he says, we're aware of the moment. We are excited and motivated to transform the problem into a positive situation. Don't worry. That is the Thiago Pinto interview for you guys. Let me know what you think. As usual, you know what to do. Leave a like, leave a comment. But more so than a like or whatever, a subscription, I do want to hear what you think of everything. So that's one way this community grows. So, jump on in. Tell me what you think. Tell me what Roma's problem is, what they need to do to get back once, I understand Roma need a keeper. Roma need faster players, this and that. But what do Roma need to do against Empoli, against the next match, right? If we look at Roma's schedule, I believe that next game is against Empoli. Yes, Sunday, September 17th. So in 12 days from now. And then 3 days after that, it's Sheriff in the Europa League group stage. And then it's Torino. And then it's Genoa, all within a 10-day span. That's 4 games. I put up 5. Whoops. So what does Roma need to do right now in order to win 4 out of 4? Because let's face it, all 4 of those games should be won. Yeah? Okay. Let's talk soon, guys. Ciao. Thanks.